Right now I'm with Professor Jean-Pierre Lehmann, who is a professor at IMD Business School, and he's also the founder and the head of the Evian Group, which is a think tank based in, it's all around the world, it travels, but right now we're in Jaipur, India. I'll just put Professor Lehmann on, and thanks, Professor, for being with us. Just a couple of quick questions. So what is the background of the Evian Group?
Okay, I founded the Evian Group in 1995 when the world was opening up. There were major reforms going on everywhere. The WTO was being founded. We were talking about globalization. And what I wanted to have was a multinational, multi-stakeholder, and multi-generational group that would reflect on how we could make globalization benefit the maximum number of humanity.
So why does globalization help in terms of alleviating poverty? How does it help the normal person?
You know, in fact, globalization helps the poor the most, if you take it on an aggregate basis. I'll give you one example. When you open up markets, you open them up to more competition. Okay, now you take a country like Brazil, that for decades and decades was closed. Then it undertook reforms and opened up. And one of the first results was the price of pencils went down by 60%.
Yeah.
It went down by 60%. So this made them much more affordable to the poor kids in favelas, in the poor neighborhoods of Brazil, and allowed them, among other things, to increase their literacy considerably. But generally, whatever you say, the point is that globalization makes goods cheaper because you have much more choice in terms of where you source, what you buy, and so on.
But doesn't it get rid of the local jobs? Don't they go export it somewhere else?
I mean, this is a dynamic process. This happens, incidentally, in nations as well as through globalization. And there's no doubt whatsoever that when you bring in competition, I would say the vast majority benefits, there's a minority that might get hurt. And what is needed to be done is to have social security programs for this minority that allows them to retrain, to learn new skills, or in the cases where they may be too old to do so, to give them benefits, financial benefits, to ease the transition.
So in Europe, for instance, there's the common agricultural policy, and essentially the Europeans sort of subsidize a lot of the crops, and I think the same happens in the U.S., Japan, etc. Can you explain a little bit about why that impacts poverty, or how that impacts the world?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the common agricultural policy and also with the American subsidies to agriculture and the Japanese and so on is that there's two things that happen. One thing that happens is that they make it impossible virtually for countries from developing countries to export their produce to these big markets. Countries like Brazil, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, etc. would benefit enormously if they could export their agricultural produce. Agriculture is one of the most protected areas. So this is impeding these countries from being able to develop. The other thing which they do, which is extremely pernicious, even more so, is that they give subsidies. I mean, if you take cotton, for example, the United States subsidizes cotton production in the United States by more than the total value of the market. So this means that cotton producers in Pakistan, in Mali, in Benin, who should be able to benefit from global market conditions because they have the most competitive prices for these particular goods, are prevented from doing so because American products is dumped, if you like, on global markets.
So why is that the case? I mean, do the cotton people have a strong lobby, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, this is the problem, is that the majority benefits from trade, but the minorities organize themselves better. So if you take the agricultural lobbies in the US and Europe and Japan, they're extremely strong. For example, the cotton plantation owners in the United States are very important sources of funds for both the Democratic and Republican Party. So this is one of the things that, if you like, makes the politics of trade conflict with the economics of trade.
Yeah. But what can a normal person do that's watching this on YouTube, for instance? What can they do to get involved? Because I have no clue about cotton or anything like that. What can I do?
I mean, one of the most important things is awareness. I mean, the image of globalization is in stark contrast with its reality. This is not to say that everything is good about globalization, far from it. But there is room for improvement. But basically, citizens benefit. The more open countries are the ones that have seen the most reduction in poverty. Now, so the first is to know, to be aware. The second thing is, I would advise people to join us. The Evian Group is it's a mission. It's not a club. We're a very open and broad church. They can access information on the Evian Group through our website, which is www.eviangroup.org, and then contact us. And we have a whole bunch of you say we're meeting in Jaipur, we meet in Cape Town, we meet in Buenos Aires, we meet in all sorts of different parts of the world, to try to sort of build up constituencies for creating a more inclusive global market than what we have at present.
So at the moment, you keep seeing these protests in Seattle, and there's all these people that are quite vehemently anti-globalization. What is their point of view, and why are they so anti-globalization?
I think partly because of a misconception. For example, when there was these demonstrations, they said, we're against corporate globalization. The idea being that it's the big firms that benefit the most from globalization. In fact, the facts just don't bear this out. But I think part of the difficulty has been the image, that there's this view that globalization is for the powerful to screw the poor, to make them more, to capture them more. So I think it's a lot of it is misconception. Having said that, as I say, there are certain things where one has to be careful. A lot of the protesters in Seattle, for example, were protesting because they saw globalization as destructive to the environment, that globalization will worsen the situation so far as climate change is concerned. And this comes back to the whole issue is that, globalization per se is rather neutral. It's how you manage it. So there's no doubt whatsoever, for example, that now globalization clearly has to take much more account of the climate change challenge.
Okay, and is there a country that you think is doing globalization right? Good policies and things that you can say that the rest of the country should be looking up to?
Well, I think that if you look at these emerging economies, if you look at these emerging economies, you have, I would say, a number. I mean, China, obviously, when you think that 30 years ago China was completely closed. Today it's the second leading global trading power. It's had 400 million people lifted out of poverty. Brazil has undergone remarkable change, is much more integrated into the global economy. Both its social and economic indicators are improving. India, to a certain extent, although in India, as we've been discussing here in Jaipur, it's not trickled down to the same extent as it has, for example, in China and Brazil. Other examples could be Turkey, Vietnam, particularly when you think where Vietnam has come from, that they have made tremendous progress in terms of globalization, which really has had an impact. And it's had an impact not just on the people's standard of living in the material sense, but also in the spiritual, cultural, and intellectual sense. Again, Vietnam, I was there in the 60s and the 70s, been there more recently. You have much more access to information. There's internet. There's foreign newspapers. I mean, it's really changed amazingly from the rather dismal place that it was a couple of decades ago.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. So that's eviangroup.org, right? Thank you very much. Thank you.